Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. This is where we take the resilience research and best practices and break them down into small bite-sized pieces that we can begin using immediately to strengthen ourselves and others. What if you could learn ways to help kids thrive? Would you spend the next 28 minutes with us? What if in the next 10 minutes you could hear from a school psychologist about 4 ways to build student resilience? Would you hang out with us? Who is us? My other half today is Dr. Melissa Reeves. Melissa is president of the National Association of School Psychologists, or NASP. This organization is 25,000 professionals strong, people every day working to build resilience in kids and help kids thrive at school, in home, and in their lives. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
So thrilled to have you here, both NASP being such a tremendous partner for the National Resilience Institute, and you being a playmate for me and all the things we do to try to get this work to more parents and teachers and communities. So I told you would be on this show, and here you are.
I'm here.
And I do want to say that we're at the beautiful Paramount Theater, and you flew in because we're hosting a local screening of the movie Resilience and a panel in which you're participating. So thank you for attending that, and to the Paramount for being here. And as always, for MediaCom, our tremendous sponsor for filming these shows. So as a school psychologist, what is resilience and why is it so important for our children?
Yeah. Resilience is one of those things that it is what gets you through life. And so when we talk about what is resilience in kids, it really is helping them learn to overcome challenges and to be able to see these challenges as kind of a little hiccup in the road, but something that by working through them and being successful, whether it's academically, social, or emotionally, or just in life in general, they're learning that I have the power and I have the control and the ability to really succeed based upon the choices I make and the things I do. So it's really to help overcome adversity and to help them be successful in whatever it is in life they want to do.
Great. And psychologists, you put out so many wonderful resources. We're going to be sharing some as we go through our segment. But one resource you have highlights 4 ways to build student resilience. The first is attitudes and emotions.
Yeah. One of the things that we really want to make sure that kids do is that they have that positive attitude. And again, that they don't see anything as being insurmountable, but that we really get them to help them see things in a very, very positive light. And so by fostering those positive attitudes, it builds self-confidence, it builds self-esteem, and they're more willing to take a risk for which then they're able to achieve more when you're willing to take that risk.
And we adults model that, right?
Yeah,
the kids are watching,
definitely.
So that is where it starts.
Right.
The second piece, competence.
Yeah, that is where, I think in today's society, everybody is being compared to everybody else. So a lot of times students feel like, I can never measure up. And especially with social media these days, there's a lot of those pressures. And what we really want them to understand is to identify their own strengths and to see their own skill sets and how we all have different skill sets, but that's what makes society works. That's what makes strong friendships, that's what makes strong schools, that's what makes strong communities. So we really want to empower them to use their strengths and to feel confident and then to be able to give back. And through that, we're building that competency.
So playing to strengths and playing together, really. I think your next one is social competence.
Yeah.
So how is that different then?
To be honest with you, when you look in life, social competence, quite honestly, is actually way more critical than academic competence. I think sometimes in today's competitive world, we get so focused on grades. And, for students, it's, am I one of the smart ones or am I not? But really, it's that ability to relate to others, to get along, to collaborate, to communicate. That social competence is what really helps you succeed in life, regardless of whatever you do. It's the ability to relate, and that's also what builds cohesive communities.
And so it has that connectedness piece to it. Speak about helping others or volunteering. How important is that to get kids involved with?
One of the things that we know about volunteering and being able to help others and give back is that leads to empowerment. And it also leads to the ability that you learn life isn't all about just yourself. And that by giving back and by helping others, that's also where a lot of those positive attitudes come in. And so they really get to see that, I can contribute to something greater than just within myself. And that by helping others and helping a community move forward, you really are leaving an imprint for generations, for lives to come. And again, that just fits into that whole resilience piece, that I can make a difference. And a lot of that comes right through the volunteer actions, whether they're big or small, just even helping a friend on a day-to-day basis, lending them a pencil in the classroom. You really see, you know what, I can help someone else succeed. And that's part of that building of resilience.
And then we're talking about psychosocial resilience, but there is a physical piece. The next one is physical health, because it really is this strength of body, mind, and spirit.
Right.
But talk to us about being physically strong.
Yeah, more and more research that's out there these days is really showing us how the mind is connected to the body, and that if students are physically healthy, meaning they have a good diet, they're getting good sleep, they have good sleep patterns, which is a challenge these days, because if we don't monitor some of that social media, kids are on their phones in the middle of the nights, their parents aren't even necessarily aware of that. But by physically being healthy, you are actually more mentally healthy, and vice versa. So it really is attending to the whole person, and that's why a lot of schools now are starting to do yoga, mindfulness, those kinds of things in school, which really get students to take a deep breath, slow down, take care physically of your body. And what they're finding is that is leading to actually higher academic scores. So it really is attending to everything.
So we've been talking about this individual resilience building, and then we're going to be moving into school and other pieces. But what other advice do you have for parents watching the show that said, okay, I have these 4 and we're going to give our tool, but what else should parents be aware of in building stronger kids?
I think one of the biggest things is that adult behaviors and reactions strongly influence children. So how the adults cope, how they work through adversity, how their attitude towards life is, how they, when they encounter a difficult situation or have an argument with someone else, how they work through that in a way that's respectful of the other person. That's what kids are looking to. So adult role modeling is huge.
Okay. And I remember having that discussion after the election. We saw a lot of that on both sides of kids being moved around by parents. So here's your tool number 1 for today, factors that build youth resilience. Model positive attitudes and emotions, foster competency in school and individual talents, support connection with friends, and help others, and get fit to help protect kids against stress and adversity. We will be talking about success and resilience at school. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Dr. Melissa Reeves, President of the National Association of School Psychologists. So we've been talking about building youth resilience, and we want to talk specifically for parents. We have a lot of parent viewers. Why are structure and routine important at home?
Right. Structure and routines for kids really lead to a sense of safety and security. So it's one of those things that when students can when they can predict what's coming up. And not that the routine is super rigid, that you're never flexible, but that there is some prediction as to what their day is going to look like. That leads to that sense of what we call psychological safety. And that helps them feel more settled and much more confident in overcoming any adversity when they know that there is that safety net there of the structure and routine. In addition, it's life skills for following routines and structures at school, in the work environment. I think some of our biggest challenges, especially with the younger kids, is when they're having to follow a routine for the first time when they start school. And when they don't know how to do that, it leads to a lot of behavioral issues in the classroom and social issues. And so it's also a life skill of having to learn how to do that.
What advice do you have for parents for that small slice of time in the morning before the kids rush off to school? What can parents do to set the day up?
Right. First of all, make sure you get up in enough time to be able to finish your routine so you're not feeling rushed. Get as many things organized as you can the night before, and then keep a consistent routine in the morning where the kids get into that routine. Then as they get older, they're able to become more independent with that routine, and that also builds that sense of independence and self-confidence that I don't need mom or dad as much anymore in the mornings because I've got this down.
Talk about that balance of letting kids struggle and figure things out for themselves and being there when they need us.
Yeah, this is such a hot topic these days because we tend to be in a society where we have many parents that they're uncomfortable with their kids being uncomfortable. So when their kids start struggling, whether it's academically or socially, they jump in there, they want to fix it for them, or they end up kind of making excuses for them or deflecting the blame onto someone else. One of the greatest things that we can do to build resiliency is when something doesn't go right, help your child figure out how to work through that. Take personal responsibility, because what that teaches in the long run is that I do have that sense of control over my life and the decisions I make. The world out there is not controlling my life. So helping them work through that is building resiliency and building that self-confidence that, okay, sometimes I might screw up. That's okay. But how did I overcome that can actually be such an important life skill, because life's about adversity. And working through that is one of the greatest gifts that we can give kids.
It certainly is. You also talk about catching kids doing good. What does that look like?
Yeah. One of the most important things is kids often hear don't do, don't do, don't do, don't do. And then what happens? They start to tune us out. What they need to hear is what are those things that they're doing well, and to be very specific. You know, I love how you just told your friend that they played great in that game tonight. Instead of you did a great job in the game, because what that's also teaching them is not only empathy for others and how to see the bigger picture, but in a very positive way, it's teaching them what you want to see. So there really should be a minimum of 5 positives to any of the constructive criticism. Plus, that's also shaping the behaviors you want instead of focusing on the behaviors you don't want.
That's a powerful equation to keep in mind. And shoot for 10, right? Minimum
Yeah,
5.
exactly.
I want to say the minimum
of
5. We are raising our kids, even us, and we're not that old, we're raising our kids in a different world than the one we grew up in. Let's talk technology. The pros, the cons, your guidance.
You know, I will say one of the pros of technology is that our kids are actually able to keep friendships and relationships up for, years beyond what, if they don't even live in the same place, they're able to keep friendships up, say, with their best friend who happens to move away. And that's really powerful, because in a way, our kids are more socially connected than we ever were, because the physical distance doesn't matter as much anywhere. The flip side of that, though, is that their social relationships are very different. And with social media, we have many of our kids getting exposed to things because all they have to do is Google it. And if we say, no, we don't want you looking at that, they'll find a friend who has a phone that they can look on. And they're getting exposed to things that cognitively their brains are not necessarily ready to process. So as parents, it's very challenging to stay ahead of this game. But when you notice that your child is getting exposed to something that maybe you didn't want them to, don't handle that so much in the punitive sense, because then they're just going to get sneakier the next time. But use that as an opportunity to talk, to dialogue, and to teach. But it's not easy, because they're getting hit with so many different things on social media these days.
And there's so many ways we could take this conversation with social comparisons. You already mentioned the need to put down, to get away from screen time.
Yes, especially we need to have limits on the amount of time that kids are spending on their phones, their iPads, their computers. And I see many parents these days using it as a substitute for parenting, because it's what keeps the kid quiet. So I'll be out at a restaurant and I look over. And one of the things that just makes me cringe is when you have a family eating dinner and they're all on their phones, or the kids are on the iPads. And yeah, in the short term, it keeps your child quiet during dinner, but you're not teaching them social skills. You're not teaching them self-control in a public environment. You're not teaching them how to order themselves with the wait staff. Most parents are doing it for them, and you're losing that precious time. So I'm a huge believer, and there are times where everybody, including parents, needs to put their phones down, and we need to do that actual dialogue. Also, when they move on in life, they need to learn how to self-monitor that so they get their tasks done, whether it's homework or it's a job, versus being so addicted to their phones that ends up interfering with their performance, and that's going to lead to other issues down the road. So that, self-control piece is also what we're teaching as parents, that limit setting.
So teach responsible use of technology.
Right.
It's not going away.
No.
And then we, I think, need to educate parents. And an example we've been talking about in our field is this movie, 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
We have a couple minutes left in this segment, but use that time to educate about what can happen and why we need to be aware of what our kids are watching.
This is a very controversial series that's out there right now. Started on Netflix, however, you can actually get episodes and stuff on YouTube. And it is about a high school student who completes suicide due to some cyberbullying and other dynamics that are going on, in addition to some other pretty difficult social situations. And the challenge for parents is that kids are getting access to this before they even know as a parent. So again, that is one of those things that more than likely, if you have an adolescent, your child has at least been exposed to this in some way. You've got to try to stay ahead of it as much as you can, but use that as a time to dialogue. And for this particular series, if you just Google it, there's a lot of talking points out there for parents as to how to structure these conversations. And this series brings up hard topics of sexual assault, bullying, suicide, and there's a lot of controversy around how they approached it, but we need to use this as a learning opportunity to have these tough conversations with our kids.
And I do want to emphasize, you said resources and NASPonline.com.org.
www.nasponline.org.
So NASPonline.org is a great set of resources. National Resilience Institute.org, great set of resources. So there are resources, and I just want to encourage all the parents listening to stay informed. And here is your takeaway from this segment. Within a positive and supportive environment, allowing children to work through challenges and take responsibility for their actions builds resilience. We're going to continue talking about building stronger children when we come back. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. We are speaking with Dr. Melissa Reeves, president of the National Association of School Psychologists. And next up, we want to talk about school climate, and specifically positive school climate. What is that, and why does it matter?
Yeah. Positive school climate is one of those things that you really want a climate in a culture that really focuses on how you interact with others. And it is really everybody feeling accepted. We're moving away from the word tolerance because nobody wants to be tolerated. Everybody wants to be accepted. So it's having, really clear behavior expectations. It's having students feel successful academically and socially, regardless of what their academic abilities are. They achieve at the level for which they can achieve, and you have programming that meet all of those needs, and you have very consistent behavioral guidelines across the school. So students know what to expect, but the hallmark is you're also focusing on those positive behaviors and the connections between students and teachers.
And there's some wonderful infographics that we are sharing with our audience as we go. And so let's also talk about the supports, and the NASP works a lot in the area of mental health.
Yeah.
So talk about the needs that you're seeing and the services being provided.
Unfortunately, the mental health needs are becoming greater and greater. And what we're finding out is of the 70 to 80% of students that have mental health needs, they're going unaddressed. And of the 70 to 80% of the students that are getting their mental health needs met, it's actually in the school setting. So we're seeing, whether it's with depression, whether it's with anxiety levels because of the competitiveness of our society, whether it's challenges in the social area, difficulties, suicidal thoughts, we're definitely seeing an increase and a need for greater mental health services in the schools, which is why we're doing a bunch of advocacy work at the national and the state levels to really try to increase funding for school mental health services so school districts can actually hire more school-employed mental health professionals.
And then as we understand more of the research and the lay of the land here and the impact that trauma has on children's developing brains, we're moving toward trauma-informed schools.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, that is actually, the preliminary data on those schools that have embraced this framework has been incredibly positive. And essentially what that is it is providing staff development for all of your staff, teachers, support staff, cafeteria staff, everybody, on understanding the impacts of trauma and seeing behavioral and academic challenges through the lens of trauma. So how can we structure the learning environment? How can we structure how we approach teaching things in a way that really helps us understand that kids that have been impacted by trauma, it impacts memory, it impacts attention span, it also impacts emotional regulation. So within these schools, you can structure your teaching environment to have short breaks. If students have conflict rather than punitive, we teach them how to problem solve, how to collaborate, how to work through this. And for those that really need more, there's mental health services provided on staff. So there's a lot of support for the teachers, but there's also a lot of support for the individual students. And what the data is showing us is that suspension and expulsion rates are decreasing tremendously in those schools, and academic achievement scores are increasing in those schools. So it's a very, very powerful framework for everybody to embrace.
Yeah, I tell you, once in our work, we find once people get educated on it and learn, they think, how could we not have known this? How could we not have been doing
Right, right. And that,
this?
you know, for example, this student isn't being oppositional defiant, or they're not intentionally trying to be difficult. But there was a situation that happened at home last night that has them scared, has them anxious. Maybe they're worried that when they get home, are things going to be safe for me? And it's the teachers understanding that that may be underlying some of the behavioral challenges. It's not that they're intentionally trying to be difficult, and allowing the students a safe place to talk about that and learn how to express their emotions appropriately.
So a lot of what we talked about that works in the home, it will work in schools, so the routines and all that. What's the role of behavioral expectations in a school? Why is that important?
Right. This actually goes back to the positive school climate, is having universal, consistent behavioral expectations school-wide. So students know what is to be expected, and there's those common core values of how you behave, but also how you treat each other. What is challenging is when each teacher sets their own expectations and they're different, and what you can get away with in one classroom, you can't get away with in another classroom, sends a lot of mixed messages. So for schools that have really embraced what we call positive behavior supports, which fits right along with the positive school climates, it provides that predictability and that consistency for students to know these are really the expectations, and part of that is being respectful to everybody.
And the relevance goes back if there's a child going back between homes, say if the mother and father or the parents got divorced, if they can get away with something in one place and not the other, that doesn't serve the child, right?
Right, exactly. So even in, you know, students that are, you know, living between two different households, that how those parents collaborate and work as a team can have a tremendous impact on positive outcomes for kids. And those parents that are able to get along, have consistent expectations, value the same things, but also are using a lot of the same positive reinforcement strategies with their kids, we see those kids adapting much, much better and being much more successful.
And again, I just want to restate for our viewers, there are resources available online to help you, or there's classes in your community. You can learn how to co-parent and provide that level of consistency.
Exactly.
I, in February, was down in San Antonio speaking at the NASP conference, and I heard you share a personal story about why you fight so hard for kids, or why you know that one life truly can make a difference. And part of your presidential theme is about small steps, but tell us about...
Yeah, I picked the theme Small Steps Change Lives because I think sometimes we all in the work get so overwhelmed by all of the challenges that are kind of facing us. And I really wanted individuals to see that it's what you do every day, interacting with kids, interacting with your own children, interacting with your friends, that can make all the difference in the world. And I had my own adverse experience back when I was in first grade. I went to reading group and I mispronounced a word. I sounded it out wrong. And my first grade teacher yelled at me and I completely shut down. And I was afraid to take a risk. I was afraid to read again after that because I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to disappoint. My mom, being the advocate that she was for me, went into the principal and said, I want the best second grade teacher you have for my daughter. And they put me in Mrs. Bean's classroom. And to this day, I still keep in touch with Mrs. Bean. I'm actually going to see her tomorrow. And she made it safe to learn. And it was okay to take a risk, and it was okay to fail. And her motto was, you learn as much from your mistakes. And you know what, I'm gonna be there, we're gonna work through this. And that was probably one of the greatest gifts that she could have given me, was that it's okay to try something new, it's okay to fail, but at the same time, we're gonna work together. We're gonna use resources each other, and we're gonna overcome this adversity, and that's what builds resilience. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for a Mrs. Bean.
Thank you to Mrs. Bean, and thank you to all of the youth builders out there. Here is your tool for our last segment together. But what a beautiful story of the power of one to change lives. Each of you viewers have the power to change a life, and this is accomplished one small step at a time. Thank you, Melissa, for being with us today. So enjoyed this show. And thank you to our viewers for joining us on MediaCom NC 22, your local programming leader.